Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Richard and I am the Bull Rider. And today I wanted to give you a top 5 list on how to modify your car to increase fuel efficiency and most importantly, increase power. And it depends greatly on what kind of car you have. And I'm gonna put these into 2 distinct categories. Today we're gonna talk about naturally aspirated motors. And if you don't know what that means, it basically means that you don't have a turbocharger or a supercharger on your car. And your engine relies primarily off of letting the air from the natural environment enter your engine without any sort of forced induction. And trying to get horsepower from a naturally aspirated motor is a little bit harder in most instances comparative to the ease of getting horsepower from a turbocharged motor. And this is for one reason, because we have to think of any motor in our car as a glorified air pump. The air comes into the motor, it's compressed, it's ignited, and then that ignition and compression causes you to have power, and then the air is ejected out of the motor through your exhaust. So depending on how well we can get air into the motor, compress it, and then get air out of the motor is going to dictate how much horsepower we have. And an engineering term that is thrown around is called volumetric efficiency. So the higher volumetric efficiency that your motor has, the more horsepower it's going to have, and typically the better fuel efficiency you're going to have as well. So the first thing I'm going to recommend if you're trying to modify your car, and it's probably the easiest thing, you've probably heard of it already, and it's called a cold air intake. And what this does is you're going to be replacing the stock air box, which is the tubing running from the air coming into the engine bay, through the tubing, and then eventually into your motor, with something that is going to perform a little bit more efficiently than the stock components. So if you get a good cold air intake system, you are going to increase the volumetric efficiency of your motor and then subsequently increase horsepower. But my tip for you is don't cheap out on the cold air intake. If you really want to do it right, go with a cold air intake that is shrouded and has a very visible flow path from where the air comes into the engine bay, goes through the air filter, and then goes into the motor. And if you don't have that really good, well-designed shrouding, your air intake is going to turn in from a cold air intake into more of a hot air intake. And it's probably going to be detrimental to your horsepower than it is going to be to improve it. The number 2 thing on my list is to get an exhaust system. So with a more free-flowing exhaust, you're going to have air coming out of the motor a lot more efficiently and then increase your volumetric efficiency. And with a stock exhaust, to reduce the amount of sound being generated, the exhaust has to go through a lot of restriction, and that restriction reduces your horsepower. So if you do decide to go with an aftermarket exhaust, you will notice an increase in noise, but you will also notice an increase in horsepower. And if you do go with a reputable company, they will specify how much horsepower you'll expect to see from their modification. And that's something really you want to look out for with any sort of modification whatsoever, because you want to have a company that will back up their claims and get you the results that you want to see at the end of the day. The number 3 modification is going to be modifying the catalytic converter system. And let's just take a step back and we can talk about this before I make any recommendations that might be illegal. And you can modify your exhaust system and your catalytic converters and change them out for a more free-flowing catalytic converter while still maintaining the same emission control systems that your car came with from the factory. And you would have to check with your local laws and regulations to determine if the modification is legal, but changing out your catalytic converter for something that is a more free-flowing catalytic converter will definitely let you gain a lot of horsepower at the end of the day. And there are companies out there that do make them that are very good systems. So my number 4 recommendation to increase horsepower is going to be an ECU Remap. And what the ECU is the engine control unit. And basically what that does is it takes all the sensors that your car has, whether it be the MAP sensor, the MAF sensors, or your O2 sensors, and then it controls and runs your motor by controlling the amount of fuel that comes into your motor, and it also controls your coil packs and subsequently your spark plugs. And so what an ECU Remap does is it takes all those tuning parameters, it takes all the sensor inputs, and then it modifies the stock tuning that came directly from the factory. And there's lots of companies that do this. I would recommend ones that are more reputable, that have dyno proven results on your specific car. And the kicker with this is, depending on what kind of motor you have, you might have varying results based off the tune that you're gonna get. And some motors have a lot more power on the table than other motors. So when you're considering an ECU tune, look for manufacturers that list your specific vehicle and the specific motor that you have in relation to the results that you expect to receive. So my number 5 recommendation, and probably the most important, although it isn't a mod and I'm sorry for that, is to just do a general tune-up on your car. When was the last time that you changed out your fuel filter? Or when was the last time you changed out your air filter or your spark plugs or your fuel injectors? Because there probably is a lot of power on the table left over at the end of the day that I want you to start out with a good baseline before you modify your car, before jumping right in, and knowing that your car is in tip-top shape before you make the modifications, and you're getting at least the bare minimum, the factory certified horsepower that your car should have before modification, is probably going to be the best thing you can do for your car. Although it isn't necessarily a modification, it's something I had to include in this list because it is critically important. And if you like this video, please consider giving it a like, and until next time, thanks.